Hello, everyone. Gary here from Timeline Astrology. This is the forecast for November 2024. The month of November is a dark time of the year. I mean, it is not literally the case. That is not until the winter solstice. And of course, for the Southern Hemisphere, it is moving into the summer, but it is the darkest time energetically speaking. And it's essentially because the sun is in Libra, it's fall. So when you think about the symbol of Libra, the two lines and the half circle on top, that's essentially a symbol of the setting sun. So why is the sun debilitated in Libra is the question, of course. And it is because Libra is the sign of the interaction, of the other, of being lost in a way in the interaction, in the other, and in the world out there. And the color of Libra, in terms of Vedic analysis at least, is black. And so it's where we lose ourselves, essentially. And of course, the sun is exalted in Aries, the sign of the self, opposite. So obviously, this is a time of year where we can lose ourselves and we're feeling lost in some way. And at the same time, it's a sort of roundabout way of getting back to ourselves. And it's why, and especially for the new moon in Libra on the 1st of November, which in India is celebrated as Diwali, the festival of lights, it's at the darkest when we can find that source of light again. As cliche as that might sound, that is essentially what this means, is that when we have any kind of darkness in our life, any kind of darkness at all, like negative thinking or a negative experience, what we might call a negative experience, it reminds us of our divinity, essentially. And we are not usually pointed in that direction when everything is light and roses and everything's wonderful. It's usually when we have some challenge in our life, even if it's just a mental projection, a doom and gloom anticipation, that we look for something else, essentially. And that's essentially what this is about. November 1st is the new moon, is Diwali, the festival of lights. It happens to be Halloween this year, the Day of the Dead. That doesn't happen every year. I don't remember the last time that happened. So this is an important time. And again, it's a dark time, but it's an important reminder. The end of November and into the beginning of December, because the next new moon is December 1st in Scorpio, where the moon will transit by the November 3rd, 4th period, where both the sun and the moon are dark, is again like a low point. And then that new moon in Scorpio by the 1st of December is that turning point in another way. So, in a way, November is bookended by these dark moons that seem quite dark. And if you were to just use this time to project out there onto the world and look at what's happening in the world and have that only be your experience, then it is going to look quite dark for no particular reason, then it's just doom and gloom. It doesn't seem to have a purpose. But if you use this time to go within, a new moon is that time anyway, but this especially and into December, as we go within, as we lose ourselves and find ourselves again, and then go deeper within to find that strength within, essentially, this is what this period is for. And in that case, then the darkness doesn't have to be a negative thing. It can be our friend, essentially. So there are other things happening, as there are every month. There are some silver linings, and there's a lot of exchanges going on in November. There are a lot of planets exchanging signs. So it actually, on the surface of things, might look bleak, but then everything kind of gets turned around in another way. And also because of maybe things looking bleak, we are maybe challenged in some way, but then we rise to the challenge or we find it within ourselves to overcome it or deal with what we need to deal with, or again, reorientate ourselves in a more spiritual sense. The other weakness, of course, is that Mars is in Cancer. Mars is also debilitated. And so Mars in Cancer is aspecting this new moon on November 1st. And so we could get very reactive and we might not feel it and we might not feel energized. And when we don't feel it and we don't feel our will power kick in, we might do the very thing that ends up making us feel more negative or gets us into a darker mood. I know I need to do that thing, but I just don't feel like doing it, or I cannot do it, or I'm not able for it right now. And then you end up in that situation where you feel less than in some way. issue with Mars and the sun both debilitated at the same time, and Mars influencing the sun. If you're not feeling confident in yourself and your ability to do something or to overcome something with both of these in their weak signs, it's likely to add to the dark mood. But again, I would say use this time to go within. Try not to project all of this outward, and certainly not on other people who are likely to also be feeling this in a strong way. And then you're then getting triggered by them in some way, likely. And that's just going to make you feel worse about yourself. This is not the time for that. This is the time, and more especially, like I said, for the beginning of the month and the end of the month, for those new moon phases, to really go within and find that strength within. And instead of getting triggered by other people. Venus is moving into Sagittarius by the 6th of November, and that's a more positive situation. So here we have a silver lining because when Venus moves into Sagittarius, it will exchange with Jupiter in Taurus. So I'll talk more about that. Sun is also moving into Scorpio by mid-month, and this is where again we can find that strength within, and we go deeper after Libra into Scorpio, where we get more devoted, dedicated to what we know we need to do, even if we don't feel like doing it with Mars in Cancer. Even if we don't have the energy to do it, we don't have the willpower to see it through right now, we're still going to do it. We just have to remind ourselves that we're not always going to feel like doing it, but we'll get it done eventually. It'll all work out in the end. The complicated aspect here, of course, is that Mercury goes retrograde in Scorpio by the end of the month, even though there's a silver lining there as well, because it exchanges with Ketu, the south node of the moon, which is in Virgo. And so it's almost if you can put Mercury in exaltation in Virgo and Ketu, the south node, in its own sign, Scorpio. So there's a real deep sense of working things out right now and overcoming something in November. And again, it's not because everything is wonderful. It's because things aren't wonderful. But because of that, we are more likely to tackle the issues. So that's, I think, November in a nutshell. November 1st, like I said, is a new moon. It's in Libra. It's in the lunar mansion called Swati. It's this very divisive lunar mansion in a way. It's another way of looking at it also, and Kishori, my mentor, has referred to it as this. It's also very distinct. Distinct is a really good word for Swati because it makes distinctions. It's like this and that. It cuts things up. One of the symbols of Swati is a sword. And it's very much about making those distinctions between me and you, or this and that. That's what Libra is all about. And finding a balance between this and that also. But first of all, making the distinction. So this is where the sun is at its weakest, where those distinctions are made. Because in another way, the sun represents the oneness that we all are. We are all part of the one. And that's why in Libra, we kind of lose that sense because now it's like, oh, I'm not really feeling it. And I'm not sure if I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing or I'm going where I'm meant to be going. And we start questioning, we start looking at our options as well. Libra is very much about choice, and that's the other side of it. And we get kind of a bit in a muddle when the sun is in Libra, essentially, and in Swati. And this new moon in Swati, this dark night, this Diwali festival, again, it would be better spent in using this light, the symbol of the light, to remind ourselves of our strength within, essentially, in this dark time. And to, yes, make the distinction between this and that, or me and the other, and this path and that path, as subsequently, of course, we have the lunar mansion Vishaka, which is about making a decision. Eventually, we make that decision. And then eventually we make it to Scorpio, and we're like dedicating ourselves to that, whatever we have decided. There's another point to be made here, though, in that this is the issue that Libra often is said to have, but I don't know if it has it as much as people say it has. When people say Libra is very indecisive, we all have Libra, remember, and at this time of year with the sun in Libra and this new moon, that can be our experience for sure. But being indecisive also leads to making a decision. We just have to grapple with it for a while, but then eventually we decide, okay, I'm going to do whatever now. I've thought about this enough. And, when we have this kind of decision paralysis that can happen, really it's not really about the thing we decide, the path we choose. It's more just about making a decision because in the grander scheme of things, it's all meant to be anyway. So if we can remind ourselves of that as much as we would lack confidence at this time with the sun in Libra and Mars in Cancer, and Mars especially aspecting the sun and sort of making us very reactive and other people very reactive. And we reacting to other people's reactions and all of these things and wondering, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but I need to do this thing, or I needed to say this, or whatever it is. All the while, we have to be mindful of finding that strength within ourselves to be very clear about who we are, what we stand for, in order for us to be able to make those choices, essentially. So it's an important new moon to make choices, but not necessarily to actually start the thing, because the new moon is the dark moon, and it's not the most auspicious day of the year in another sense to start new things, but it is a time to at least decide. So Mars is opposite Pluto all this while, and this is what complicates things enormously. But at the same time, the other side of that is it allows us to see the blocks. Mars is more obviously an issue when it's not strong and we don't feel it. We don't have the energy or willpower to do the thing that we know we need to do. And at times, then we might overcompensate and overdo it. That's the issue with Mars in Cancer. And especially into December as it retrogrades, we're going to feel a lot more energized to do things, but it's not going to move forward as quickly or as straightforward as we would like. And at the same time, Mars is opposing Pluto all this while. And Pluto are the hidden aspects, the hidden sort of, it's like the saboteur in us that prevents us from doing the thing we know we need to do. The positive side of this Mars opposite Pluto transit, and this is the first of just three, like it's going to go on for a long time. So it starts in October, continues in January, they come back into exact opposition, and then in April again next year. So it's going to go in and out of this exact opposition. And it is great, I think, for clearing blocks, subconscious blocks, and at least being very mindful, being aware of them, because that's what Mars does. It pushes things into our awareness. The downside, of course, is just that we see lots of blocks. And that's what I would say is that if you feel like there's a lot of blocks coming up in your life and it seems like I'm not getting from A to B clearly, there's no clear route, this person or this situation has been put in my way now, and all you can see is that opposition or that block. I would say don't just look at it as an opposition or a block. It is telling you something important. It's telling you, it's pointing towards blocks that you have in yourself. And of course, related to whatever these signs are, where it's happening in Capricorn and Cancer, again, Pluto in Capricorn, Mars in Cancer. Generally, in the world at large, these blocks are quite obvious. In the world in Capricorn, the bigger structures in the world, the things that usually make us feel safe are no longer making us feel safe with Pluto in Capricorn. And with Mars in Cancer now, we're likely to get very reactive and because we don't feel safe. And try not to overreact, I would say, because of course, yes, if something happens and you need to deal with something, then deal with it. But if something happens on the other side of the world that doesn't have a direct impact on you, is it really worth reacting very strongly to that? Consider your reactions, in other words, because Mars in Cancer opposite Pluto is likely to be overreactive and see threats where there aren't real threats. Now, at the same time, there are more positive things coming in here, like I said, and Venus and Jupiter are that in particular, and I'll talk about that in a while. But the sun is, by a lot of estimations, at its weakest point by November 5th, which is really interesting because that is, of course, US election day. And I think together with the moon in Scorpio also at its weakest, this is a bit doom and gloom looking. And people going to the ballots at this time in an election that is going to have a huge impact on the world is important to recognize. What would people vote for if they're feeling doom and gloom? They're looking for hope, essentially. And there are some indications of hope here in November, despite the kind of outward doom and gloom scenarios. So this is something to consider, I would say. One of those things is Venus moving into Sagittarius on November 6th. And as it does so, it exchanges with Jupiter in Taurus because Jupiter is in Venus's sign Taurus. So this is more hopeful. And it's hope in a way that is born out of not necessarily an obvious place. It's hope born out of the darkness in some sort of doom and gloom expectation in one way, but it's also hope for just enjoying the simple pleasures of life. And though Taurus and Sagittarius don't seem to meet at all, they're not on the same page. They don't look at each other at all. They don't see each other. They don't understand each other in a way. Taurus is very down to earth and practical and wants to enjoy life. Sagittarius is so much more idealistic and wants something more always, something more meaningful, something more purposeful. But the trick of this here and the fact that they're exchanging Venus and Jupiter is that we have to find meaning in the sort of everyday enjoyments of life, the simple pleasures. And in doing so, it opens up a door for something more meaningful, in fact. We don't always have to have those big ideas to give our life meaning. Sometimes it's just the simple things. That's what I think is the benefit of this exchange. And in a way, that's the way out here. Then by mid-month, we have a full moon, a second full moon in as many months in Aries. This is now at the very end of Aries, whereas the full moon in October was at the very beginning of Aries. And of course, that means that the sun is in Libra in its fall. And so a weak sun with a full moon in Aries obviously tips the balance into Aries, where it's all about the self, our own selfish needs in a way. But we cannot obviously just think about ourselves at this time because we have to think about the others' needs with the sun in Libra, and we have to find a balance. This full moon is in Kritika, which bridges both Aries and Taurus. And it's very much about, just as Vishaka and the other side of the zodiac is about making a decision, Kritika is about more so making the decision, but kind of clearing something out, like getting rid of something. Kritika, as it sounds, is about cutting something out. And in a way, it's about cutting something out so that we're left feeling more optimistic, we're left feeling more buoyant in some way as we move into then the full moon in Taurus, where it's exalted. It is a more positive time, I think, by the end of November than it is the beginning of the month. But there is a sharpness about Kritika. The symbol is a blade, and it's about, like I said, cutting things out, but it could also be harmful in a sense. It's a very sharp as well as a very soft lunar mansion. So it has both qualities. So we have to compromise with ourselves and with other people at this time for this full moon on the 15th of November. And again, it's a balance between Aries and Libra anyway for a full moon in Aries. So we have to have that kind of compromise in place. And as every full moon is, it's a resolution and, resolving to do something. And maybe more especially, like I said, to cut something out will be more helpful at this time and then prop us up a bit more. And again, this is a kind of silver lining in the month as the moon then meets Jupiter, as Venus is moving through Sagittarius, exchanging with Jupiter and Taurus. There's a lot more buoyancy, it seems, by the end of the month because of this. The other big thing that's happening, of course, is that Saturn is stationing to go direct by the 15th on the full moon day. And so this is in Aquarius, sidereal Aquarius, where we're thinking about our big plans, our ambitions, our goals, our objectives in life, and they are now slowly, very slowly, moving forward after November. It might feel like they grind to a halt in one way, but in another way, at least they're shown a way forward. And now you're going to be able to move forward with your big plans, whatever they are, in relation to the sign Aquarius, of course. Aquarius is the big plans we all have in a general sense, but depending on what the house position of this is in your birth chart, will show where you have big plans. Always. That's what Aquarius is. But with Saturn in Aquarius and its last station to go direct again, and by next year it'll be out of Aquarius, this is an important juncture because it's asking you to really look at your long-term goals here and to make sure, are you really dedicated to this plan? Is this what you want? Because after it starts moving forward now, it's going to start moving. It's going to start happening. So make sure that you're on board with it. Try and keep an open mind, of course, as always is, the case with Aquarius. It's always a case of being open-minded and not being too fixated on how you think things should progress. That's the downside of Aquarius. You think things should progress in this way, but really, do they need to? Because if you're too rigid about it, it cannot progress. Now that Saturn's moving forward, it's asking you to just stay open-minded about how things can move forward. The day after that, on November 16th, the sun moves into Scorpio as it does every year. And of course, it moves out of its weakness sign and from Libra into Scorpio, goes into the depths of Scorpio, and we find that again, strength within. And this is an important time to find that, of course, and to go through that kind of transformative experience, as Scorpio always suggests. And by the time we have the new moon here by the 1st of December, as the moon comes around again and meets with the sun in Scorpio, that's a whole reset and finding that strength again. Until then, of course, and from the November 16th phase until the 1st of December, It's about finding our feet in a way again, and finding our confidence in ourselves and our own ability again. And even though Mars is still weak in Cancer and we maybe not feeling it and we're not feeling so energized or we don't have as much willpower to do the thing we need to do, we're still at least finding some confidence in our own self with Sun in Scorpio. We just need to get our energy back. But by December, that's going to come back because by the time Mars goes retrograde by December 6th in Cancer, it behaves as if it's exalted. So we're going to feel more energized by that. And we're going to like dig deep and find that will and power and energy and confidence to do what we need to do. Mercury, though, then of course throws a spanner in the works. It's usually the case that Mercury comes around. It is the trickster planet after all. And everything seems to be going forward. And I'm okay, Saturn's moving forward now. The sun has moved out of its weakness. And, I'm getting things done and I'm feeling more confident at least about what I need to do. Maybe I haven't got the energy yet, but I'm confident about what I'm doing at least. And then Mercury goes retrograde in Scorpio with the sun there. So obviously this is a bit tricky, but this time there is a silver lining also because we have yet another exchange. We have Mercury in Scorpio exchanging with Ketu in Virgo. This is more positive. It means that we can go there mentally, figure it out, research something, go deeply into it, and go beyond it. Essentially, we can figure it out practically also when we've had those insights and do something about it. We can plan something. But of course, Mercury retrograde suggests that we have to redo things. We have to rewrite things, redraft things, reassess things, review things, retreat for a while to figure all of this out. And it's going to take a while. So from November 26th until December 15th, Mercury is going to be retrograde in Scorpio. And it's not a sign it's necessarily that comfortable in. Again, even though the exchange between it and Ketu is more positive this time, but at the same time, it's not that comfortable dealing with all the emotional undercurrents that are in Scorpio and all of these kind of triggers that now Pluto and Mars opposite each other are triggering in us. And we're likely to get reactive and to say things maybe that we later regret. And we have to be mindful of kind of any kind of doom and gloom thinking at this time and staying grounded in what is real and practical and do very practical things. That's the exchange between Mercury and Ketu. So that is November. I'll talk more about the new moon on the 1st of December in Scorpio. It's an important new moon, of course. But if you would like to join me on Patreon and get your sign-based forecast for the month of November, you can go to patreon.com/timeline astrology. And you can also tune into the Scorpio Audio Club there. I share more of the secrets of Indian astrology, and I do a lot more besides. I share a mid-month forecast, a more in-depth forecast than this. And of course, again, you can get your sign-based forecast when you really can apply it to your own life and make it more relevant to you. Everything I mentioned here is just a general sense that we all have, the kind of outer weather that's going on for all of us. But to know how it's affecting you personally, of course, you can also book a reading. You can go to timelineastrology.com. I do personal readings. I think I've got bookings by the end of November into December. I've got a few spaces open for December still. So if you'd like to book before the new year, please let me know. Yeah, hope that's been helpful, folks. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.